Ladies and gentlemen, could we please ask you to take your seats and ensure that your mobile devices are switched to silent as this session is about to begin. Please take your seats. This session is about to begin. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This next session is beginning now. Could I please ask you to take your seats and ensure all mobile devices are switched to silent. Please take your seats. This session is beginning. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's lovely to see you all here, and it's a huge honor as well. My name's Kate Hampton. I'm the CEO of the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, and I've been working my entire professional life on the COP process, and so I'm so glad to see finance right at the heart. I'm also on the COP28 Advisory Committee, so I'd like to extend my thanks to the UAE for putting this session together. Importantly for today's discussion, I was extremely honoured to be part of the group that Prime Minister Motley and the Deputy Secretary General gathered in Bridgetown in mid-2022. And I think we're all here because we agree with her assessment that the world has changed and the scale of the multiple crises we're facing is ever increasing. And we need to bring climate and development finance together. In the face of these demands, the global finance architecture is no longer fit for purpose, but needs to change. both in speed, in scale, and in fairness of representation. We've all come a long way since that first Bridgetown meeting, and finance reform has been at the heart of the international calendar since then, whether it's at the Paris Summit or at the exceptional Africa Climate Summit, through the hard work of India's G20 expert group, or indeed within the COP process under the Egyptian presidency and since. I'd also like to call out the work of the V20 finance ministers with their Accra Marrakesh agenda. Now, many of the key priorities with Bridgetown are moving forward, along with other actions such as establishing important country platforms and high integrity, emphasis on high integrity carbon financing. And these are all crystallized within the UAE Declaration of Leaders on a Global Climate Finance Framework. And in all this work, we've set the ambition, and there's consensus now about the direction of travel. We all agree that the MDBs and the IFIs need to be both better and bigger. Working across the system and with the private sector and civil society, we need to get finance to those who need it most, who often face huge impediments, not least of which is cost of capital. So it's time to talk about implementation. It's time to talk about practical steps, innovative partnerships, and we need to turn this ambition into action, which is indeed the theme of the COP. We're turning billions to trillions, and that's what we're talking about today. We've got an extraordinary lineup of speakers. We're going to be opened today by the UAE Minister of Finance. We also have the heads of the World Bank and the IMF, and many of the MDB presidents, all of whom will be talking in concise, I hope, but also very concrete terms about the action they're taking to move us forward. And it's my absolute pleasure to invite our opening speaker to the stage, His Excellency Mohammed Al Husseini, the UAE Minister of Finance.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's an honor to open today's event, which is focused on making climate finance more available, accessible, and affordable to achieve our shared ambition of meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. The international climate finance architecture will need to be fit for purpose to deliver the climate finance we need at the right speed and scale. Fixing climate finance has been a key pillar of the COP28 presidency agenda since the beginning. In this regard, it remains imperative for us to maintain our momentum and build upon our achievements. Regardless of the complexity of the task and the scale of the financing required, each stride towards fixing climate finance will significantly contribute to our shared objective. Moreover, it is important to actively acknowledge our collective accomplishments and not solely focus on our shortcomings. On December 1st, we launched the Declaration of Leaders on a Global Climate Finance Framework. This was developed, championed, and endorsed by the leaders of India, France, Kenya, Barbados, the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, Ghana, Senegal, and Colombia. The framework offers a set of principles for a climate finance architecture that can deliver for all. It brings together the reform agenda progressed by the Africa Climate Summit, the Paris Summit, the Bridgetown Agenda, the G20 Summit, and many others this year. This framework has three crucial elements. The first is rebuilding trust by delivering on past commitments. On this, we have seen a milestone agreement made at COP28 on the Loss and Damage Fund. Pledges over $720 million have already been made to support countries in dealing with the loss and damage, including $100 million from the UAE. We have also seen the largest ever replenishment of the Green Climate Fund with over $12 billion in pledges. The second is seizing the economic opportunity to climate action. The UAE's $4.5 billion initiative on clean energy in Africa, announced 3 months ago, has already deployed over half of this finance into projects in Africa. to support green industrialization and country-owned investment plans for green growth. The third is delivering at scale. At COP28, the UAE has announced a $30 billion climate fund called Altera, the world's largest private investment vehicle for climate action, which aims to mobilize $250 billion globally by 2030, and I invite you all to partner with us in this fund. Additionally, I welcome the fact that MDBs have already delivered a record of nearly $100 billion in climate finance last year, of which more than $60 billion is to low and middle income countries. Moreover, I commend the significant progress MDBs have delivered on the implementation of the Capital Adequacy Framework recommendations. In the past few days at COP28, we have witnessed some good announcements from MDBs. The World Bank announced an increased climate finance target of 45% by 2025, with half to mitigation and half to adaptation, which means $9 billion additional per year in climate finance by 2025. The Inter-American Development Bank announced it will aim to triple its climate financing to $150 billion over the next decade, in line with the G20 MDB expert group recommendations. Many MDBs have announced they will offer climate-resilient debt clauses in their loans that pause a country's debt when it's hit by a natural disaster. On adaptation, I also welcome the announcement from the Islamic Development Bank to allocate over $1 billion in climate finance to countries affected by conflict and humanitarian crisis. These are just a few examples of the good initiatives that have been announced in the past few days by MDBs. Additionally, the IMF has made good progress on supporting climate resilience through the use of special drawing rights. The UAE is supporting the IMF's efforts through our pledge of $200 million to the RST Trust, as announced during COP. The multilateral climate funds have announced yesterday that they will work together to harmonize their standards to increase access to climate finance. These are all steps in the right direction and completely aligned with the principles of the Global Climate Finance Framework that we have launched with key world leaders. In the joint MDB statement released yesterday, MDBs have laid out a vision for better collaboration. MDBs have committed to work through country platforms, develop a common approach for reporting climate results, launched a long-term strategy facility to support countries, and launched common principles for tracking nature-positive finance. Finally, we have been calling to action in IFI's reform since the start of COP28 presidency, and I'm happy to see that this has created positive momentum and tangible action. I invite you all to work towards implementing the shared vision we have launched with the Global Climate Finance Framework, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the role you can play in making climate finance available, accessible, and affordable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. And a huge congratulations to the COP team for securing an outcome on loss and damage on day one. I'd now like to invite the heads of the MDBs onto the stage. I think we have a photo opportunity. I hope you're all expecting that. Please do come to the stage. So before we move to the panel section, I'd like to welcome also the COP28 MDB joint statement, which we're celebrating here, that was announced this weekend, and once again sets out what the MDBs are doing to work together and raise ambition in the name of climate action. We'll be talking about that more in a moment. Please do. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Minister Mohammed Al-Husseini. Thank you to our MDB presidents. I'm now going to turn to our first panel as our MDB presidents, some of them leave the stage. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So we have the Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina, you're staying put. Yes, indeed. We also have Dr. Adesina. I believe you're joining us for this panel. Please do join us. Thank you very much. We have the head of the Green Climate Fund, Mafalda Duarte. We have the president of AIIB, Jin Likun. We have the president of EIB, Werner Hoyer. And last but not least, our high-level champion from COP27, Mahmoud Muhaidin. Where's Mahmoud? We're missing a couple, but that's okay. Welcome to the stage. Welcome to the stage. Thank you. So our first panel is an opportunity to look across the MDB and IFI system, and we'll be asking the esteemed panelists where progress they think has been made over the last year and a half since Prime Minister Mottley launched the Bridgetown Agenda. And of course, our panelists are going to be setting out their thinking on the much needed areas of action and implementation, including in the financial model of their institutions, but also crucially in the operating model, and in the good work that's underway on country platforms, already referenced by the Minister, and sectoral transition strategies. And of course, given that 3 billion people are now living in countries which are spending more on debt servicing than on health or education, we must tackle the issue of debt solutions and how we mobilize more concessional capital. And I'm pleased that we're about to do that with a panel that really does work on all of these elements of the system. There's a lot to get through, but I'm going to start with Kristalina Georgieva. I know you have to leave soon, but we're going to try and keep the panel to time. So much of the conversation in global finance focuses on the MDBs, but the IMF obviously has a unique role to play in terms of macroeconomic shocks. And given that these are increasingly going to be related to climate and nature shocks, can you tell us how you think the role of the IMF is going to evolve?
Very significant change in the role of the IMF. Today we are a systemically significant institution in the fight against climate change. Because climate shocks are macro-critical, they affect macroeconomic and financial stability, and the opportunity of the green transition is a pathway to green jobs and green growth. What it means for us at the IMF is that we now integrate climate considerations in our macro analysis, in our stress testing of the financial system, in the data work we do at the IMF, and of course in terms of financing. This is since we got a great start from our minister with specificity. Let me tell you, we have exceeded our target for the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. We are now over $41 billion, with the latest contribution from UAE as well included. We have delivered already in one short year 11 programs. 6 of these programs are in Africa. They're all done with speed. Average time about 3, maximum 4 months. How we were so successful to move fast? Because of partnerships. We work with the World Bank, with the Inter-American Development Bank, with the African Development Bank, so we can identify what are the policy obstacles for countries to move faster to access climate finance. We are very keen to demonstrate that our ability to open up fiscal space for countries is used for structural transformation. First time in the history of the IMF, we provide long-term concessional financing, 20 years maturity, 10.5 years grace period, and we offer it to not only low-income countries at concessional terms, but also to vulnerable middle-income countries. Looking forward, we concentrate on two topics. First, domestic resource mobilization. We know that countries need to raise money domestically even more than internationally, so tax systems, quality of spending, local currency markets. Second, on building more systemic policy work on the key policy obstacles for moving faster on the green transition. The use of harmful subsidies. Fossil fuel subsidies were 1.3 trillion last year. The use of good subsidies, investing in R&D and investing in what the public sector can do to help the private sector move in. And also, we are very concentrated on building the power of partnerships. In every single opportunity, we work with others because together the whole is bigger than the sum of individual parts.
Thank you, Kristalina. And it was really great to hear you talking about longer timelines, which is something that we've heard again and again from countries that are struggling at the moment, and introducing the importance of policy change and having the right fiscal environment. I'm sure many of these things will come up. I'd like to turn to President Adesina now, who I know has been working on a number of key areas to crowd in private finance and raise additional resources through hybrid capital and support adaptation in fiscal policy as well. Can you share some of those? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I'm actually here very delighted at this COP, because the most important thing is really all about how you do climate adaptation. For us in Africa, that's the main issue, right? How to mobilize that has been at the core of it. So I'll talk about some of the things that we're really focusing on as we're here. So on that particular issue, we launched what's called the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, which is a $25 billion initiative together with the Global Center on Adaptation. It is the largest climate adaptation program in the world. We as African Development Bank, we put today 67% or 64% of all of our financing into climate adaptation. So that's the first thing I want to say on that. The second thing I want to say is we were just coming from a meeting now with Mia Motley and all that on the debt clauses, pausing the debt issue. We are also launching at this particular COP what's called the Africa Climate Risk Insurance Facility for Adaptation, which is a $1 billion facility to insure countries against catastrophic risk events. So that's very, very much important if we're going to do sustainable development. And thirdly is how to support African countries to green their infrastructure. And so we launched also here what's called the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, which is to mobilize $10 billion to help Africa to green up its space. But to your point on the issue of financial innovations that you're talking about, you know, I welcome the G20 capital adequacy framework. We are responding to that. In fact, most of what they said, we've been responding to even before they said it. You know, for example, the African Development Bank was the first multilateral development bank to do a synthetic securitization. We started that way back in 2016 for $1 billion. We got support from the UK government to do our second synthetic securitization for $2 billion, which freed up $2 billion of headroom for us to invest in climate-resilient infrastructure. And also, we are working on callable capital. Minister, you're here, and thank you for your support on that, because we need that callable capital. But in addition to that, we are also doing the hybrid capital, which is very, very critical for us to be able to leverage a lot more resources. And that's where I want to really end on that and compliment my sister, and commend and compliment my sister, Kristalina, on the SDRs, when she was talking about how we work together. You see, the multilateral development banks are leveraging machines, right? And because of our capital structure, we can take those SDRs. We came up with one with together Ilan it's here somewhere. Yeah, hi. To see how we can actually take the SDRs and stretch them and multiply them so that we can complement the great work of IMF with the PRGT and the RST. And well done, Kristalina, for all the work there. That model now allows us, as multilateral development banks, to be able to levy 3 to 4 times every single dollar of the SDR. I want to thank the IMF for really working closely with us on that. And I think, secondly, it also allows us to be able, it comes for the donors at zero cost, literally, because we pay for the cost of it to the IMF. And thirdly, and we are very, very comforted by this, Kristalina, is that your team assured us that it actually meets the reserve asset quality. So that's really the thing that you have to have for that. So, from Ilan and myself and all the other colleagues on the MDB, I can give you a high five on that. We can move on this. We hope that we have to concretize this before the IMF meetings in April. And if we do that without leverage, I think, Kristalina, we can probably even think of jiggling the SDR name. Maybe we might call it, supporting development revitalization, and that's also SDR. So thank you very much, Kristalina. We appreciate that.
I don't think I've seen a high five on an MDB panel before. That's definitely an innovation at COP28. I was really pleased to hear you talk about debt pause clauses, President Adesina, and I can say, AJ in the front row, and thank you so much for putting debt pause clauses, not just in future, but considering also existing debt. It's such an important piece of liquidity support there. And again, you referenced partnerships, so I hope that's going to be an ongoing theme of this panel. And I'd now like to go to President Leachin of the AIIB, which has cemented itself as a vital part of the ecosystem. And your new climate action plan, I have to say, shows your role as a real innovator in areas like blended finance and debt market innovations. And we've heard about collaborations with GCA between MDBs and the IMF, and now you're also considering work with philanthropy, as I understand it, as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to let you know, while at this moment I'm talking here, our staff are working on the ground in many countries who are our members. We need actions. We need to translate what we are committed here to reality, to the tangible results. Briefly, 2 points. One is the MDB is working as a system, and we have also contributed. Over the last couple of years, we have strengthened the cooperation, but I would say the joint commitment in Marrakesh is really a boost to the team-up spirit. We work as a team, and we support each other. We share the same objective, and we have the same vigor and vitality to do what we are required to do. With regard to what we've been doing in this bank, and as you know, we have the first climate action plan, which would guide the management and the staff in a way we ramp up our efforts to help our members to achieve climate objectives, particularly adaptation, mitigation, and overall environmental ecosystems improvement. And we have the corporate strategy, which stipulates that this bank would achieve 50%, at least 50% of the financings for climate change by 2025. 2022, we achieved 56%. And this year, again, we will go over 50%. By 2030, we would have 50% at least of the financing supporting private sector. So these two objectives would be overfulfilled ahead of the schedule. So all this indicates that we are not just talking, we are working. And this is a new bank. We are 8 years into operation. We are adequately capitalized, but we are actively participating in the capital adequacy framework discussions. In this regard, I would say that we are not going to solve simply the capital adequacy issue. We're trying to have the kind of reform which could help MDBs more sustainable in promoting sustainable development. So we go beyond simply the capital adequacy. And in this regard, I'd like to thank Kristalina for RNST, and we are working together in supporting Bangladesh. And more countries will benefit from that. So, and also we work with Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Asian Green Partnership Fund. This is also something, you know, we've been talking about mobilizing private sector resources, philanthropies, and I think this is a very, very good start. So let me share with you my basic fundamental thinking that only by working together could MDBs leverage their limited resources to have a big impact. Our bank's basic principle is to be lean, clean, and green. We must use the capital which comes from taxpayers' money most effectively. And our bank's name is Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So it's AIIB. But we are also having creative ideas. So far, from now on, I will say AI, a little bit pause, IB. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're a bit short on time, which often happens at these summits. So I would just note that the next three speakers, and I apologise, the most patient usually get their time cut, which is a great unfairness in this world. But if you could keep your comments to a little bit shorter so that we can finish on time, I'd be extremely grateful. And Mafalda, we've seen unprecedented collaboration a lot to do with your leadership between the different multilateral climate funds. And can you tell us what your vision is and about your joint statement and the role of GCF now that you've taken over? Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. It is really great to see the momentum on the reform of the finance architecture, much critical, because as even we came to this COP, the science is telling us that the window of action is narrowing if we are to meet 1.5. And so the examples that His Excellency Minister of Finance of UAE articulated are just the latest of the great results that we are accomplishing in that area. Much like what we heard this morning or earlier today about the multilateral development banks, we are trying the same thing across the major climate funds, trying to see how we can work better as a system and be enablers of really greater ambition. So yesterday, much like the MDBs as well, we also issued a statement, a joint statement, and we commit ourselves mid-next year, so very short time frame, to come up with a position on how do we see complementarity across the funds. What is it that each of our institutions is best positioned to deliver? And also a concrete proposal to our boards on how we are going to align and simplify access, because this is really what countries are asking for. But in addition, we hope to continue to engage with the multilateral development banks, because we want to be, as I said, we are enablers of others. That's our role, is to be enablers of others. So we are very keen to engage in understanding, as the discussions on the MDB reform agenda progress, how can we be enablers of that reform and ambition of the MDBs? Of course, some of us have a very clear task, like the Green Climate Fund, to mobilize private capital. Just right here at COP, we announced several initiatives, one of which is first guarantee company to really guarantee climate bond issuances and loans. Another one, also a first financial institution dedicated to subnational borrowing, to mobilize capital through different ways, and others. We announced initiatives with equity funds to reach the hardest to reach in Africa in terms of energy access. So, and our commitment is to double down on those initiatives. Let me stop here.
Thank you so much. And what a joy it is to hear the reference to subnationals and the hardest to reach communities. I think this has been a real gap in our finance discussion, and it's a difficult issue, I know, for MDBs, but this subnational, getting close to the communities is absolutely crucial. So thank you very much for those remarks. President Hoyer, you consider yourself Europe's Green Bank, and as an MDB, you've ended your support for fossil fuel projects, including gas, and have committed 50% of your lending to go to climate by 2025. And I heard also you want to mobilise €1 trillion in climate financing by the end of the decade. How is it going? Please tell us.
I hope it works. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here. I mean, we have been in Sharm el-Sheikh last year. We have been in Washington, in Marrakesh. We have had the big event in Paris. Have we made progress? Look at what's written up on the ceiling. Unite, act, deliver. Have we delivered? I think the patience of the people around ourselves is running out when it comes to the MDB community. We must now deliver. We must go into delivery mode. I think we should not send the wrong signals from this COP. No reduction in the ambition when it comes to our climate objectives. As far as EIB is concerned, you mentioned that we opened our new gateway in 2019, and on all the objectives you have mentioned, we are well on track. But this is not enough because we need to do this in closest cooperation with the other MDBs and, by the way, also national agencies. I think we can deliver, but we must get serious. In 2022 alone, we supported the Climate Action Project with almost €37 billion, and the economic case for many climate action projects has been strong. Just look at the surge of renewable energies around the world. There is no trade-off between climate action and development, and we must stop putting climate action, development and innovation into three different boxes. These three belong always together if we want to be successful. Our focus is on concrete and tangible projects. Several are announced during the COP. Climate change affects every region on this planet, and never before has the urgency to transition to be more sustainable, to more sustainable economies been greater. We must not leave any doubt that we do not reduce our ambition, and I'm afraid that sometimes relativation messages are coming from this COP, and that would be detrimental. We are announcing a new approach to support a just transition and just resilience worldwide, because we need to see that this ambitious transition can only work if it is organized in a fair way. We must organize a just transition. We have made that experience within the European Union when we announced that we move out of unabated fossil fuels immediately in 2019. We had member states of the European Union who got into the real trouble because of this. And this is why I had to tell one prime minister, said, the last miner who is going to leave the coal mine in your country, he's not going to be the head of the digital startup in 2 weeks. We must support this transition in order to make it a just and fair transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for raising the issue of just transition, which applies domestically but also internationally. And I'm now going to turn to Mahmoud, who can give us his sense. I think you've been in these discussions for a long time now. We'd really like to hear your reflections, and you can be as challenging as you like to end this first panel, on what you've seen in terms of progress between these two COPs, and what would you like to see arise from the global stocktake and all of the things that are being discussed here?
And all of that in less than 2 minutes. Yeah, thank you. Well, time is our enemy, not just for sessions, but basically in what we are after. And last year, we had an emphasis on the fact that climate finance is insufficient, inefficient, and unfair. The Honourable Minister started us with towards a climate architecture that is available, accessible, and affordable, which is basically the answer to what we highlighted last year in COP27. And this could be very much COP28, could be considered the COP of good news for many funds. We started with a loss and damage fund that we hope in the future will need less of its services if we are doing a better job in mitigation and adaptation. We started as well with the fantastic news announced by the UAE in the $30 billion Altera Fund that was in the making with hard work for more than a year, with a test of its mechanism in Africa for $4.5 billion, including a $1 billion for catalytic support. Now the $30 billion includes $5 billion for catalytic support. Then another good news for the Green Climate Fund with $12,475 million, and every dollar counts, and I was a witness of that through the replenishment, and many thanks to all of the countries participating. And I see my good friend Ambassador Thorne was here in the room when the announcement of the US was made today, yesterday. And then, well, with courtesy to Kristalina, one of the best announcements. She made many good announcements, but what's your best, Kristalina? I'm not taking your job, Kate. You mentioned carbon pricing, you mentioned a platform for debt management and debt swaps, but your best is basically the one for Bangladesh. That should be the example to follow. RST, working with the MDBs as a platform for climate finance, focusing on adaptation, paving the road to the private sector. This is the example that I have been, I'm not going to charge you for that, I've been spreading around that this is the way that the RST should be working. Here we have World Bank, IFC, ADB, MIGA, AIB, AFD, and of course GFC and JICA. And the private sector where I was just with in another session, we're basically seeing where is our role, can we be benefiting from that, and we started to explore opportunities. All of these are great initiatives, but not enough to bridge the gaps of the session that you were moderating, the good work by Vera Songwe and Nixon and their colleagues in bridging the gaps, because the gaps are in the trillions, and what we're talking about still in the billions. And we have been at it since 2015, where we're talking about billions to trillions, and you remember when you signed with other MDBs and the IMF on that. How can we do this? I think we need to get our act together. Domestic resource mobilization is essential. Private sector leveraging is important. Enhancing the efficiency of disbursement of the funds from MDBs. Working based on the rule that was set, and I think this is the golden rule for any developing economy in the room. This is what I call Deng Xiaoping rule. That he said, a proud man, leader of his country, he said to Mr. McNamara, we can do it on our own. But with you, we can do it faster and better. So here, this is the test. If you cannot do it faster and better with the MDBs, you need to shop around elsewhere. But I think with this determination, I think we can really do better. And here, for those who are upset of my insufficient, inefficient, and unfair phrase of last year, I'm still stick with it, despite the improvement that we had. And I would go to President Ajay Banga, when he mentioned in September and then in Marrakesh that he's going to be the chief plumber of the system to improve the disbursement of the funds from 27 months to less. And then he mentioned something very strong about capital and capital adequacy as well. The most important part, and I'm happy that the President of AIB mentioned that while he is here reflecting priorities, his staff are in the field. The staff of the MDBs and the IFIs, including, of course, the IMF, are the best assets. But these assets need to be leveraged by capital adequacy that can support them. There is enough of efficiency gain that could be done through squeezing the lemons. And you mentioned the work on debt management, on finance, on contingency funding based on the Bridgetown. But it has a very strong call for capitalizing the MDBs, for them to continue being relevant and dealing with the reforms required. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. And thank you also for putting front and centre concrete examples that are really helping countries, because this is what we're really talking about. How do we do exactly what you describe, which is mobilize the entire financial system through country platforms to deliver on the objectives that countries are setting, and do more together, to be more ambitious, as Werner was saying, but also faster, as you've all said, and more collaboratively. So I'm going to bring this panel to a close. I think one of the most exciting things about this agenda is that we really are now moving to implementation, and we're starting to see innovations get scaled up. And that's very exciting. So whether it's the IMF with your mandate on stability, really rethinking your work, or the MDBs doing all of this innovation, or the multilateral funds collaborating as they do and really thinking about where the system is not serving and how they can be the highest best use. This is all very exciting, and I think this should play into the discussions that are happening at COP and then play out again with a strong mandate for finance ministers, because ultimately a lot of the legacy of this COP sits with finance ministers. So thank you very much to the panelists. Please return to your seats. I'm now going to welcome our second panel. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you so much, Kristalina. Thank you very much. Thank you. Lovely to see you. Thanks so much. Excellent. Mike, do I need to sit down? It is live? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Can I ask Presidents Banga, Ronobasso, Asakawa, Rousseff and Goldfein to the stage. And, of course, Mr. N.K. Singh, who's been running the expert group. Feel free to sit wherever you like. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. Hi. Okay. Thank you very much. So, bigger, better, bolder MDBs. That's the subject of this panel. The session so far has talked about getting the finance flowing with collaboration, but I think Mahmoud was very clear-headed at the end about some of the challenges we're still facing and the way we need to reimagine the system. So now we've got the opportunity to talk to MDB presidents and the World Bank president to talk quite specifically about the collaboration and how the system is rising to the challenge and coordinating, and how they're translating the increasing ambition we're seeing from countries and non-state actors in the transition. So, as I said earlier, I do hope our panelists will keep to time. I will do my best to do that. But I'd be particularly interested in hearing about both financial and operating models, about country platforms and sectoral strategies, and also on debt solutions. What are the concrete things that we can do to move from ambition to action? And I'm going to start then with Ajay Banga. We spoke on day 0 of your appointment, I think, along with many others, and thank you for doing the huge amount of listening that you did do early on the need for a better bank, as well as critically a bigger bank, and those two need to go hand in hand, and you talked so powerfully on that in Morocco. Can you tell us about the package of deliverables that you've brought to COP, and how you're using your role as potential coordinator, not just within the banks, but also private sector, civil society and other actors?
Great. So, Kate, thank you. And thank you for being so clear with your advice on day 1. You helped me understand what I needed to get done in many ways. So thank you again for that. I think the first thing we've managed to do is to move our vision statement to move beyond poverty reduction and shared prosperity to include the idea of livable planet. I cannot emphasize to you how important that is. It changes the way our employees in the field and our staff and our shareholders feel about how our money and our effort and our knowledge should be put to work. It includes climate, it includes fragility, it includes pandemics, it includes food insecurity, things that are intertwined crises with poverty. So to me, that is really mission critical for the bank. Now, let me tell you how that translates into what's happening here. We've come here with 5 specific things. The first one you referred to, and I think the minister referred to it as well. 45% of our financing will go to climate by 2025. I'm really keen to keep it in a short frame. 25 is 2 years away. We will get to 45% by then. Of that, half will go to adaptation and half to mitigation, because we cannot make climate only be about emissions. It has to be about the downstream impact that the global south is facing from those emission-heavy growth that we have enjoyed in other parts of the world. The second thing we've put together here is on methane, and the Minister and I were discussing it. He specifically asked me to mention it. What we're saying is that we will, over the next 18 months, with 15 countries, sign up to attack the methane that is emitted from rice paddy cultivation, from livestock, and from waste management. We've got very specific projects in the field. We can quantify what the savings in methane are. We're going to get this done. In the next 5 to 7 years, we pull 10 million tons of methane out of the system. Methane is 80 times more dangerous than carbon dioxide. Methane gets 2% of climate finance. We need to start talking about methane and doing something about it. That's the second big thing. Third big thing, everyone told me in London when we were having lunch with you, various of the civil society folks there, that Africa has 600 million people without power. We're announcing a $5 billion from IDA and $10 billion from private sector to hit 100 million people with power in Africa, solar energy and grids, developed and done. 7 years from today, it'll be finished. Funded and finished. Fourth, I am not finished. I've got 5 things to tell you. Fourth item, voluntary carbon markets. I believe that the only way to get money from the developed world to the developing world in a constructive way is to do something about voluntary carbon markets. The bank has been working on forestry-related credits for a while. We have now got 5 countries ready to go, 11 more in the pipeline. By the end of next year, all 15, 16 should be in. We think we can generate 24 million credits next year, 125 by the end of 5 years. If I can get $20 for each of those credits, not for 5 and not 100, but 20, that's real money. Why do I think I can get 20? These are projects we are involved with. We are doing jurisdictional audits on the quality of the credit, so we can give it an environmental integrity tick box. We're also doing, most importantly, social integrity audits to make sure the money goes to the community and the indigenous people living there. Actually, Ilan is very helpful on this with the work we're doing together in the Amazon. And so that is the fourth item. The fifth item is the idea of those climate-resistant debt clauses. Not only are we pausing debt repayment, we are pausing interest for 2 years. And most importantly, the cost of doing all this, liquidity and fees, we're absorbing through our own trust funds. And the idea of doing that is to give everybody a free option with no tags attached on having to cater to a catastrophe that no one is designed for. A small state that loses double digits of its GDP cannot cope with debt repayment at that time. So those are the kinds of things we're working on. A lot of this is working through collaboration, and I'll finish there. Ilan is on the stage, so he knows this. Others are here too. A lot of this is addressed in NK's report. He'll talk about it. But the idea of collaborating as a system is mission critical. If we cannot get our standards, which is what the EBRD and us are doing, or if we cannot get collaboration on projects or co-financing done in a very simple way, then we are not being the best partners for our clients in the field. That is something we're all committed to working on together.
Thank you so much. And just because it hasn't been mentioned so far, I just wanted to highlight your mention of methane and non-CO2 gases. If we're keeping the most vulnerable communities at the front of our minds, this is the best way to slow temperature increase, because it's like a break, because the emissions don't last so long in the atmosphere. So thank you for really centering that, as well as all the other work you outlined. Thank you. President Asakawa, ADB has played a key role in the Indonesia JETP and has been a leader in innovation also through its ETM initiative. And we've heard about hybrid capital and guarantees, and you've been a real pioneer there. And the Bangladesh government has just announced a country platform where you're the leading partner. And we heard from Mahmoud in the previous panel just how exciting some of that is. So please do go ahead and tell us a bit more about these innovations and how to scale them.
Okay, thank you, Kate, for raising those 3 initiatives we have been working on. First of all, country platform, especially on Bangladesh. Like our fellow MDBs, ADB is answering the call to scale up climate action. Thank you. We also recognize that no single institution's development partner can do this alone. So we have been working to develop the Bangladesh Climate Development Partnership, BCDP, with the government of Bangladesh and development partners. Led by government, it will bring together stakeholders across sectors. It will focus on finance, policy reforms, project preparation, knowledge, and monitoring. This platform will align with Bangladesh's vision to become a developed country by 2041. Under the partnership, development partners will align their country programs with Bangladesh's climate priorities. And this partnership will help to secure long-term commitment and predictability in climate financing. It will also contribute to the development of the country's climate finance architecture and help mobilize private sector financing. Second item I'd like to touch on is ETM. I am very proud of our ETM, Energy Transition Mechanism, which has a potential to be one of the biggest carbon reduction programs in the world. ETM was developed in partnership with our developing member countries to leverage a market-based approach to accelerate the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. The ADB ETM program is currently engaging with 5 countries: Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Philippines, and Vietnam. It is also considering transactions in others. ETM has a potential to help countries reach more ambitious emissions targets than their current one. 2, reduce energy costs by speeding up the retirement of coal, oil, and diesel-fired electricity, which will increase the demand for clean energy and lower overall energy generation costs. And 3, drive investment in renewable energy by unlocking investments in efficient and cost-effective renewable energy, such as hydrogen, electric vehicles, and other clean technologies. And finally, on IFCAP, ADB is working with partners to scale up climate investment, including from private sector. The IFCAP, which stands for Innovative Financing for Climate in Asia and Pacific, will use guarantee mechanism of ADB's sovereign loan portfolio to leverage billions of dollars for climate investment. IFCAP is the very first leveraged guarantee mechanism for climate finance to be adopted by MDBs. IFCAP will strengthen ADB's development member countries' capacity to develop their low-carbon and climate-resilient strategies and build a larger pipeline of potential investment. IFCAP was approved by ADB's board in April this year and was officially announced in May at ADB's 2023 annual meeting. Japan's $600 million contribution, just announced here in Dubai a few days ago, has increased IFCAP's financing guarantee to over $1 billion, which also includes $300 million contribution from the United Kingdom and $100 million from the Republic of Korea. With a model of $1 in, $5 out, our ambition is to secure $3 billion in guarantee, which could create up to $15 billion in new loans by much-needed climate projects across Asia and Pacific.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's great to hear the high leverage that you're getting from some of that early work. I'm now going to turn to President Honorbeso. EBRD has done some really interesting work in both Egypt and I heard the other day also in North Macedonia that's very pertinent to our conversation. But you've also made some large-scale institutional commitments as well, right? So please tell us about those.
Yes, a few years ago, we made the commitment to be 50%, to have 50% of our financing in the green sector. We reached that in advance already last year, and we will keep on track on this commitment. And since this beginning of this year, 2023, we are fully Paris aligned, which means that we look at every project and need to ensure that it's consistent with the objective of 1.5. looking at that, and you know, we have a business model which is focused mainly on private sector, 75% of our activity in the private sector, 25% in the public sector, a lot of sub-sovereign, and this was discussed previously, but I think this is a very important dimension. We realize that in order to really address climate change, and we need, of course, to work project by project, to bring our competence to work with our clients in delivering the project, but that a more holistic approach was needed. Because it's very, I mean, we all know it's quite challenging to deliver a green transition for the energy sector or for the industrial sectors. It's a complex issue touching upon a number of factors in the country and so forth. And that's on the demand side. On the offer side, I mean, the financing side, it's also very complex. You have all the MDBs working together, but with their different mandate. You want to bring the private sector, you want to bring the concessional financing, or you need to bring some concessional financing. And that's where we realized, I think, that really working on country platform, on a holistic strategy is very efficient. So we designed that with Egypt last year in the COP with what it's called NWAFI initiative, where we are in charge of the energy pillar, and the commitment was to decommission inefficient gas power plant for 1.5 gigawatts, deliver 10 gigawatts of renewable, and I mean, have the accompanying measure in order to ensure that this can function for the country. And this has worked very well. We managed to unlock 500 million of concessional financing in order to be able to finance, you know, the grid, the just transition dimension, reskilling people, helping with the preparation of the project. And this will trigger 10 billion of investment, US dollar investment in the renewable. And implementation is already going on, so it's a sort of JETP, but already being implemented, and decommissioning will start first quarter 2024. The grid financing is on track, and we already start with IFC financing of some of the renewable. The other example we have is North Macedonia, where the country commits to close every coal power plant by 2030, and coal represents today 40% of the energy mix of the country, and to move towards renewable. We will get some financing from a climate fund in order to help there also with the just transition and to finance the grid there also, and will finance renewable with a private sector. I think this approach is what we need to do. We are looking also at some thematic approach like industry decarbonization in some countries, so how to define the pathway in very heavily industrialized country like Turkey, and how do you work with the government, with the private sector, and the manufacturing business in particular, to go for decarbonization. So I believe that these are very important tools in order to deliver on the ground and to match between the concrete work on the ground and the big objectives we have.
Thank you very much, Adil. And I really want to highlight something that's also really crucial for this COP, which is renewables are increasingly dealing with increasing energy demand. And if the IEA is right, and we're at peak fossil carbon or close to it, our real job now is to focus on the trajectory down of fossil carbon, but also non-CO2 gases, and really think about how we're going to get to the near halving of emissions by 2030 that is necessary. And it's really great to hear practical examples of how you are financing that transition, because greenfield sites are one thing, but actually really dealing with some of the brown transition and moving to green is much more complex, and something also that the private markets need to get a grip on. So thank you for your leadership on that. NK Singh, we were on a panel earlier and I unfortunately had to cut you off because we were running out of time, and it wasn't, I just want to point out, it wasn't his fault, it was people before him. You've put out 2 really important reports this year, and you're the critical friend on our panel today. Please tell us where you think there's been progress, and we're going to give the MDB presidents a good end-of-year holiday, but what do you want them doing on January 2nd?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be able to be part of this very distinguished panel. And with your very calibrated moderation, if I may say, a difficult task. So let me say, we have come a long way in a short time. And let's at least take credit for the number of achievements. What are these achievements? First and foremost, go back a year ago. The nature of the dialogue and conversation has changed fundamentally. We know what to do. We have a program. We have quantifiable targets. These programs have been broadly endorsed by the international community. Endorsed very, very triumphantly in Marrakesh, which we all know. Thereafter, note 3 events which took place. The Paris Pact, the OECD declaration made a lot of progress beyond Marrakesh. Thereafter, in the session which you had earlier, the contents of the Nick Songwe Amar's Bhattacharya is very far-reaching. Great symmetry between the recommendations which we made and now. Look at the declaration which was adopted day before yesterday, which really more or less is in the same area. So we are really having a convergence of belief. Is it only belief? No. I think that credible action has begun by all multilateral development banks in some measure or the other. Towards what objective? Towards the objective which the Minister and others have mentioned of having a better bank. What do I mean by better? A better bank which is, has institutional mechanisms, has a country platform, has a robust pipeline of projects to be financed, and which is really more and more responsive to client needs. Better. We also know that we need to have bolder banks. Bolder means that instead of risk aversion, more informed risk decision making. I think that some of the banks have shown great part on it. Must compliment the number of initiatives that in his short period the President of the World Bank has undertaken in multiple directions. And in terms of the alacrity with which, based on what the G20 did, to set up 30 working groups on each of the 30 recommendations, that's not a small achievement. That's now part of the whole process in which we can monitor. And bigger banks, bigger in terms of not only adequately harnessing and optimizing the balance sheet. On that, of course, I must compliment really the Ajay, that the World Bank has begun, credible processes, getting approvals of executive boards, getting its own governance structure and so on into it. I think the other MDBs in some ways should follow and replicate that. Is that the end of the story? No, because you need bigger bank will ultimately need additional finances to be put in. And we cannot overlook the need for additional finances by just really saying, get the balance sheet optimized and take bolder decisions. What are the key areas of expectations, in my view? In 4 lines, the key areas of expectations. Have we done enough, or is it adequate to be able to harness private capital? A daunting challenge on that. A very credible report was given by B20 under the Indian presidency, which some members Ajay is aware of. They are also in the private sector lab which he has set up. And I think we need to take some note of that, of how to mitigate risk, foreign exchange risks, how to mitigate risks in being able to better regulatory standards, how to really improve the entire framework, a regulatory framework. That's one big area, the private sector capital harnessing. The second big area is have MDBs begun to work as a family, where the sum becomes, the ultimate thing is bigger than the sum of the parts. And that requires thinking. I'm very aware of what the next speaker, she had very repeatedly, very legitimately pointed that each one has their own shareholders. They all have their own accountability patterns. They are in different ways accountable. to their own ethos in which they work, but within the framework of that, while respecting all that, working as a family will make a decisive change. The last point, and I'll stop there. We need to keep our focus strongly on this subject. There are multiple initiatives, including the one being undertaken by COP on this important issue, to remain focused, to monitor progress on appropriate occasions, like, for instance, today's meeting, like what is going to happen in spring meeting, in the midterm review of the COP, in terms of the annual meeting. And I must really say that updating the kind of reports that the World Bank has done, following on the spring meeting, they followed it up by another report which focused on climate in Marrakesh. I'm sure that by the time of the spring meeting and annual meeting, there will be further updates, not only from the World Bank, but from all other multilateral development banks. Let me end on an optimistic note that we should take some pride in the achievements of the last 1 year, the multiplicity of action, the consciousness which we have, and the urgency which we realize we need to take to be able to meet the challenges which lie ahead of us. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Well, that's an extraordinarily clear scorecard. Thank you very much. And you've made my job summing up a lot easier. So thank you very much for that. We're now going to turn to President Rousseff, who runs NDB, established by the BRICS in 2014. Could you please share with us your views on the crucial issue of local currency financing and how you can contribute to deepening local capital markets, particularly in emerging markets and developing countries? Thank you.
Many international studies show that in virtually
Thank you, AJ.
Many international studies show that in virtually all recent financial crises in emerging markets and developed countries, currency devaluation combined with volatility interest rates have been playing a crucial and definitive role. These occurrences produce a mismatch between debts in dollar or in other strong currencies and the receipts in local currency. The consequence is recurrent and profound debt crises that compromise the capacity of investment in climate action, SDG, and nationally determined contribution. Largest output falls, loss of jobs, and crescent unemployment social setbacks have occurred in Latin America, in Africa countries, and even in Asia. The momentum to spend local currency has a concrete basis. According to the World Economic Forum agenda, by 2026, emerging economies will account for 45% of world trade growth. Although international trade in general did not experience exceptional growth in the last decades, only 30.7 per annum, some developed countries like China have dramatically increased their share of global value chains trade in the period, also in all the Asia area. There also has been a substantial and sustainable surge in transactions in emerging market currencies over the last 20 years. So there is a basis. Another thing that is important is to understand that the use of local currency should be understood not against, but as a complementary and diversified initiative inside the international financial system based on the centric currencies like United States dollar and euro. The local currency is one of the components. of a more multilateral order. Therefore, it's clear the importance of hedge fund and local currency. But what are the means to do this? First, the steady tendency, as we have seen, towards growing bilateral trade between emerging markets that gives rise to increased returns on the scale in the use of their respective currencies, to the detriment of those obtained with the other currencies, strong currencies. Second, the emission in local currency, besides happening in local capital market, will have a main effect to strengthen the local capital market. Third, mechanisms as the Contingent Reserve Agreement, CRA, like the other proposed by the BRICS country, constitute insurance schemes to counterbalance the balance of payment crisis. It should be noted that in order to fulfill our commitment to finance the private sector in Global South, in our member countries, funding local currency is essential as it provides borrower with greater security. The flow of payments to the banks is denominated in the same currency as the flow of receipts generated by the projects, thus imparting stability to the project finance schemes and public-private partnerships, among other financial models, and don't incur in huge costs of hedging. The NDB is committed to the fight against climate change and provide investment in climate change in all our investments projects, infrastructure and social aspect, fighting against inequality, but because we understand that development is only possible if it is sustainable, inclusive, and resilient. So, we think it's fundamental to make any agreement in the cooperation between MDBs to provide more local raising funds in local currencies. And we need to build bigger, bolder, and better, and more effective MDBs, to think that there is some conditions that if we don't address, we cannot finance, because we don't control the macroeconomic conditions. We don't control the movement to raise interest rates and also to make consequence in the other currencies in the world. Yeah. For that, the local currencies is a kind of securitization of the movement to invest. So combine local currency with strong currency is a condition to invest in climate change, because I think there is a problem. We won't face the problems of climate change if you will not change the finance condition architecture to the Global South.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And it is indeed something that is of huge concern to many countries that I've been speaking to, that it's not necessarily the quantum of debt, but the structure of debt that makes them particularly vulnerable to external shocks. So we must tackle this issue of currency, scaling up some of the interventions around managing currency risk, but also, as you say, deepening local capital markets and local currency support. I'm now going to move to President Goldfein. We're slightly over time, so just so that the organisers know, I will try and wrap up within the next 5 minutes. You're going to be head of the MDB group, and it's nice to finish with some strong representation from Brazil as well, because we have the Brazilian G20 and COP30, so really exciting to hear about that agenda. Could you briefly say what you're going to do going forward, but also there's some exciting news from IDB. I don't want to take that away from you, so thank you.
So thank you, Kate. It's a pleasure to be here. I see 0 minutes. That I cannot do, but more than maybe 1, 2 I can do. Well, the exciting news is that we are going to triple our financing to climate and nature to 150 billion out of 50 billion today or next 10 years. That actually is something that we're very proud. We are also concentrating on some particular places. The Amazon Forever program, where we're going to have 5 billion additional financing. We are bringing several areas. We're bringing the development banks that they're going to finance up to 20 billion. We're talking to the private sector, to the private banks. We are coordinating with the World Bank on the Amazon bonds, and I'm not going to high-five here. Yeah, but we can do it, okay.
Excellent.
We are partnering with other, with governments where, for example, Sweden gave us guarantees exactly for the Amazon. Italy and Spain just came up. So that's a way that you start with a program, is holistic. You bring everywhere together, that gives momentum. MDBs, it's a very interesting coincidence. The G20 is coming to the region. We're going to have the G30 in Belém, Pará. We are the IDB in the rotating. We are going to have the presidency. I think the combination is that we are getting agendas aligned, and I think we can work together. And thinking about working together, that's the first item which is very important. How can we work as a system?